record.
Buy my mixtape. Fire.
Alright guys, apparently this is where we left off yesterday, so we're picking up here with President Andrew Jackson. I'm going to say Johnson. We've got a lot of Andrews, Johnson being one of them, Jackson being the one that we're talking about today in this particular one. Remember that Jackson appeals to the common man. This is our first president that's not a founding father, but he was a war hero. Does anybody remember what war he was a hero in? 1812, yes, the War of 1812. So he appeals to the common man. He tells the common man, look, I'm like you. I like to gamble. I like to hunt. I like to race horses. I like to shoot. I like to drink. So he was just kind of that kind of guy that appealed to the common man. Plus, a lot of states at this point, particularly newer states like Kentucky, are dropping the property requirement for males. So it used to be that only white males with property could vote. Now we're actually going to see that property requirement drop. So it's open now to more white males. Also, this is the first time that we see a presidential candidate go out and conduct the campaign the way that we do today. They go out, they meet people, they shake hands, they give ribbons, they give buttons. Before Andrew Jackson, Jefferson, and Adams and those guys pretty much laid back and let their friends get other people to vote for them. So when Jackson becomes the president, he starts something known as the spoils system. And that's kind of based on the quote, to the victor goes the spoils. So he gives all his friends and supporters nice, cushy government jobs. Do you guys think that the presidents still do that kind of thing? No. You don't think they give their friends and supporters government jobs?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they do. They're gonna have to, in a way. They're gonna have to appoint people in very important positions, and they're gonna pick from their friends those who they think is most qualified for those positions. All right, with Jackson, we see the disappearance of the Federalist Party, but we see the appearance of the Whig and the Know Nothing Party in opposition to Jackson. So they're going to start opposite of Jackson. They don't like Jackson. All right, looking at our political cartoon, do you think the person that drew this liked Jackson or didn't like Jackson? What gives you that clue that it didn't like Jackson? Right, he's on a pig. That's not very, very nice thing to do to a president. He should be on a horse and he should look heroic, but he's on a pig, and that's kind of telling the viewer here that he was not a good president, that he abused his power. All right, we're good? All good, neighborhood? Okay. Slavery becomes a greater issue as we expand westward. So we have a famous abolitionist newspaper called The Liberator. To me, that makes perfect sense to call an abolitionist newspaper The Liberator, because they're trying to liberate the slaves. This is actually published by a white gentleman from Massachusetts by the name of William Lloyd Garrison, and they're going to use, in their newspaper, The Liberator, they're going to use biblical verses. They're going to try to show that slavery is unchristian, that it's immoral, those types of things. Around the same time, we have a variety of slave revolts right here in Virginia. We've got the Nat Turner Rebellion that takes place in Southampton, Virginia, down near Virginia Beach, where we have a couple of hundred white men, women, and children that were unarmed that are killed by revolting slaves. And then we got Gabriel Prosser. Gabriel Prosser is the one in Richmond that tried to take over Richmond, but somebody tells on him, the weather was bad. He and 20 other slaves are going to be arrested and executed for their efforts. These not only lead to harsher laws in Virginia, but also lead to harsher laws against slaves across the South, because now slaveholders are scared. Most slaveholders were extremely outnumbered by their slaves, and the thought of a revolt was very terrifying for them. We also see Southerners not only grow fearful of increased slave revolts, but they're growing fearful of the increase in Northern abolitionists. So those are two things that were scaring Southerners at that time. Now remember, when we started talking about the abolitionist movement, we also started talking about the women's suffrage movement, because a lot of Northern abolitionists were also women's suffrage supporters. So remember that they had that famous meeting at the Seneca Falls Convention in New York, and they're going to write their own declaration. So instead of the declaration saying all men are created equal, what did their version say? and women. There you go. All men and women are created equal. And two of the leaders there at the convention, you guys should see that they're pretty familiar to you, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony. And you guys have been talking about them since middle school. All right, so far so good? We're all good? Okay, some sounds here. All right, the Northern economy is based on industry and favored a high tariff. Do you guys remember what a tariff is? What's a tariff? Good, it's a tax, and in this case, it's a protective tariff. It's a tax on imported goods. So if you owned a factory, you liked the high protective tariff because that protected your products. That meant that your competitors' products were probably more expensive and that the consumer was more likely to buy your product. But if you lived in the predominantly agricultural South, you don't like those tariffs because it makes prices overall very expensive. And so we even see an opportunity here in South Carolina to try to nullify the tariff of 1832. They said, no, this tariff is too high. It's ruining our economy here in South Carolina. We're not going to pay this tariff. We're going to nullify the tariff. What does that mean, nullify? Void it, yeah. So trying to get rid of the tariff in South Carolina. But Jackson actually responds by threatening to send in troops. And so we see that kind of foreshadow of the Civil War right there in South Carolina with the threat of sending troops to force them to pay the tariff. All right, so far so good? Everybody's good? Natalie's okay? Natalie's like, no, I've had better days. You okay?
Yeah, I'm good.
You just seem uncomfortable in your skin today or something. I don't know. Just not yourself. Maybe I'm just feeling it. Okay, new territory led to conflict. Missouri Compromise. Remember that Missouri entered as a slave state. Maine enters as a free state. You guys ought to remember the Missouri Compromise because it covered was not just covered in one unit, but multiple units. It creates this east-west line, this Missouri Compromise line, this 3630 line of latitude, where everything that will become a state is going to become what kind of state? North of the line. Free state. Everything that becomes a state south of the line will become a slave state. You got it. So that's our Missouri Compromise. That was one attempt at trying to avoid war over slavery and also try to balance representation in Congress, particularly for Southern senators and congressmen. They're really worried about this imbalance in Congress because they think that if there are more senators that represent free states, those senators will make a move to try to end slavery in the southern states. But this moves us now on to the Compromise of 1850. So we had a ton of compromises here as we move closer to the Civil War. What happens in 1849?
Something with gold rush.
Gold Rush in California. You got it. You guys kind of got it together. So the Gold Rush in California happens in 1849. That's why they call the miners that rush out there, they call them the 49ers. How did the gold miners feel about folks showing up with slaves? They didn't like it. They thought it was very unfair. So they're like, no, we're all out here working. You know, you shouldn't have slaves. That's an unfair advantage. So we actually do see the Compromise of 1850 enter California as a free state. Okay, so California enters as a free state. This other Southwest territories are going to be able to decide for their own. That's part of the Kansas-Nebraska Act that allows for popular sovereignty. What is that popular sovereignty? The people get to vote. You got it. Asher's like, people's vote. He knew that one. Yep, the people get to vote. That's going to repeal the Missouri Compromise, and now it's up to the individual territory to decide by a vote of the people whether or not they're going to be a free state or a slave state. It sounds like the perfect solution, but what happens? What does it lead to? Bleeding Kansas. Yes, they end up fighting each other. So you end up seeing militia from different towns engaging in battles that we refer to as Bleeding Kansas. Now, this time period in these compromises also leads to a new political party that we now have. But the Republican Party is a very different Republican Party today than it was back then. Back then it was created in order to try to stop the spread of slavery. Now, obviously, they don't need to worry about that anymore. All right, so we're good? All good neighborhood? Okay. All right, let's try a little map practice. Let's take a look at page 22. Let's see what you guys can come up with for page 22. All right, so we've got a variety of kind of blocked open looking areas. See if you guys can situate them. All right, number 1 says the United States acquired this area as a result of the treaty that ended the American Revolutionary War. 2 letters are required here. What do you guys think that is? B and not E. H, yes, B and H. So that's going to be this whole green section here. We've got the original 13 colonies, so the original British colonies. But if you guys remember, Britain actually held territory all the way out to the Mississippi River that America will get with the Treaty of Paris in 1783. But if you guys remember, they had that proclamation line. So they told the colonists, don't go past the Appalachian Mountains, but they did actually own the rest of that territory that America gets at the end of the American Revolution. All right, number 2, when the United States purchased this territory in 1803, it doubled the size of the country. Yes, the Louisiana Purchase. So it's going to be F. So on your map, it is F, the Louisiana Purchase. Who purchased that? Jefferson. There you go, Jefferson. And everybody was very surprised that Jefferson did that because being a Democrat Republican, this was a bit of a surprise. He doubled the size of the national government. All right, number 3, increased migration of Americans into this area followed the American victory and the War of 1812. The area was later acquired from Spain. E, yes, E. So that Florida cession, the Adams-Onis Treaty from Spain in 1819. So there's E. All right, so number 4. The American claim to this area was strengthened after the War of 1812. The United States government later peacefully agreed with Great Britain on the northern border. A, yes, Oregon. You got it, the Oregon Territory, which is A on your map. All right, number 5, American migration into this area led to armed revolt against Mexican rule, including the famous Battle at the Alamo. C, yes, your Texas annexation. So C, remember that Texas, the settlers are lured into Texas by the promise of what? Cheap something. Cheap land. You got it. Cheap land. Come to Texas. Get some cheap land. But then Mexico's like, whoa, wait a minute. We've got too many Americans. And they brought slaves, and they want to speak English, and they want to have a democratic government. And so Mexico tries to stop Americans from coming into that area. But lo and behold, we end up with the Battle of the Alamo, and Mexico and Texans fighting each other, and then for a period of time, Texas is going to be an independent country. It takes a while for them to enter into the United States. Do you guys remember why? What were they arguing about, which took so long? Right, whether it was going to be a slave state or not. Very good. All right, last one here, number 6. The United States acquired this large area following the American victory in the Mexican-American War. D, yes, the Mexican cession as part of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. Awesome. Guadalupe. All right, we're all good? Okay. Let's move ahead. All right, let's go to page. We're now going to page. Wait a minute. I think I skipped something here. Pretty sure I did. Okay, 29. We're going to page 29. Page 29. Everybody good? 29. This actually puts us halfway through content. So we're all good. We're on track to finish up. Okay? Everybody's on 29? All right, causes of civil war. We've got tariffs. Remember we talked about the North likes the tariffs, the South hates the tariffs. Slavery issues, states' rights. So you say states' rights and slavery are pretty much connected because the southern states wanted the right to say whether they wanted to stay a slave state or not. We have a little lady from Massachusetts by the name of Harriet Beecher Stowe. She's going to write a book that was very important in American history referred to as Uncle Tom's Cabin. And in this book, she follows the story of a family in the South that owns slaves, follows the relationship between those slaves and the family, and really shows the evils of slavery. And how it wasn't just evil for the slaves that were being held, but it was also an evil for the family that held the slaves and how it made it difficult for them. You think that life would be easy, but life was very emotional and tough, especially for the children of the slaveholders that didn't quite understand the relationship